The story of Samson begins with the promise of a miracle, a divine intervention that would change the course of history for the Israelites. Manoah and his wife, who had longed for a child for many years, were visited by an angel of the Lord. This divine messenger brought news that would not only fulfill their deepest desires but also set the stage for a significant chapter in Israel's history. The angel announced that they would have a son, a child chosen by God for a special purpose. This son was to be no ordinary child. He was destined to play a crucial role in the deliverance of his people. This son, Samson, would be set apart from birth as a Nazirite, dedicated to God with specific vows that would shape his entire life. The Nazirite vow was a profound commitment, a lifelong dedication to God that involved strict observances and rituals. The Nazirite vow meant abstaining from wine and grapes, a symbol of purity and separation from worldly pleasures. This abstinence was a constant reminder of the sacred duty that Samson was to uphold. Another key aspect of the Nazirite vow was never cutting one's hair. This uncut hair was a visible sign of Samson's dedication to God, a mark of his unique calling. Additionally, he was to avoid contact with the dead, further emphasizing his separation from the ordinary and his commitment to a holy life. These outward signs symbolized an inward devotion, a life set apart for God's service. They were not just rituals but profound expressions of faith and dedication, marking Samson as a man chosen for a divine mission. From the very beginning, Samson carried the weight of this sacred calling. Even as a young child, he was aware of the special purpose that God had for his life. His long hair and the rituals he observed were constant reminders of his unique role in God's plan. His birth was a testament to God's power and faithfulness. It was a moment of great joy and celebration for his family, but it also carried with it a divine purpose that would unfold in the years to come. Samson was destined to begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines, their oppressors. His life would be marked by extraordinary feats of strength and courage, acts that would demonstrate God's power and bring hope to his people. His life, a beacon of hope, held the promise of freedom for his people. Samson's miraculous beginnings were just the start of a remarkable journey, one that would inspire generations and remind them of God's unwavering commitment to their deliverance. The Bible recounts incredible feats of strength displayed by Samson. He tears a lion apart with his bare hands. Single-handedly, he slays 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. He carries the gates of a city upon his shoulders, walking for miles. These acts weren't displays of human ability. They were demonstrations of God's power working through a yielded vessel. Each victory pointed back to the source of his strength, the Spirit of the Lord. Samson's life was a living testament to the truth that with God all things are possible. His very name, Samson, meaning son, reflected the radiant power he possessed. He was a shining example of what God could do through someone wholly dedicated to him. His life was a beacon, drawing people to the awesome might of the one true God. Despite his divine calling, Samson was not immune to human weakness. He was chosen by God to be a Nazirite, set apart from birth to deliver Israel from the Philistines. His life was meant to be a testament to God's power and faithfulness. However, Samson's journey was marred by his inability to fully commit to his divine purpose. He was a man of great strength but also of great flaws. His physical prowess was unmatched, and his feats of strength were legendary. Yet, beneath this exterior of invincibility lay a heart susceptible to the same temptations and weaknesses that plague all of humanity. He was driven by passion, often making impulsive decisions that led him down dangerous paths. His emotions frequently overruled his better judgment, causing him to act recklessly. These impulsive actions often had dire consequences, not just for himself but for those around him. His desires, particularly for Philistine women, repeatedly compromised his commitment to God. Despite knowing that these relationships were forbidden, Samson's attraction to these women was overpowering. Each liaison drew him further away from his divine mission and closer to his eventual downfall. He allowed himself to be enticed by what his eyes saw, rather than seeking guidance from the one who held his heart. His infatuation with Delilah, a Philistine woman, became the most infamous of his entanglements. Delilah's betrayal would ultimately lead to his capture and humiliation. He chased after fleeting pleasures, neglecting the sacred vows he had been called to uphold. The Nazirite vow required him to abstain from wine, avoid contact with the dead, and never cut his hair. These vows were symbols of his dedication to God, yet Samson repeatedly broke them in pursuit of his desires. His story serves as a reminder that even the strongest among us can fall prey to temptation. Samson's life is a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing one's passions to override one's principles. It shows how even those chosen by God can falter when they lose sight of their purpose. Each time he gave in to his desires, he drifted further from the source of his strength. His connection to God weakened, and with it, his ability to fulfill his divine mission. The more he indulged in his passions, the more he distanced himself from the divine guidance that had once been his greatest asset. He began to rely more on his own understanding, and less on the wisdom of God. This shift in reliance marked the beginning of his downfall. By trusting in his own judgment rather than seeking divine counsel, Samson set himself on a path of self-destruction. His life, once a beacon of hope, started to flicker under the weight of his choices. The burdens of his actions began to overshadow the promise of his potential. Samson's story is a poignant reminder of the importance of obedience and the consequences of straying from one's divine path. Samson's downfall began with Delilah, a Philistine woman who captivated his heart. Blinded by his infatuation, he revealed the secret of his strength, his uncut hair. The Philistines, seizing this opportunity, shaved his head while he slept, stripping him of his God-given power. They captured him, blinded him, and forced him into slavery. The once mighty Samson, now powerless and humiliated, became a spectacle for his enemies. His story serves as a stark warning about the consequences of disobedience. His physical blindness mirrored the spiritual blindness that had begun to cloud his judgment. He had allowed pride and lust to lead him astray, neglecting the very source of his strength. His downfall, a tragic tale of wasted potential, reminds us that true strength lies not in ourselves, but in our dependence on God. Even in his darkest hour, Samson's story takes a turn. The mighty warrior, once feared and revered, now found himself in a place of utter desolation. His strength, which had been his pride, was stripped away, leaving him vulnerable and broken. Imprisoned and blinded, he finally understood the depth of his betrayal. The weight of his choices pressed heavily upon him, and the reality of his actions became painfully clear. He had squandered the gifts given to him, and in doing so, had betrayed not only himself but also his people and his God. He recognized his own weakness and acknowledged his need for God's forgiveness. In the silence of his cell, he began to reflect on his life, his mistakes, and the path that had led him to this point. It was a moment of profound introspection, where he saw himself not as the invincible hero, but as a flawed human being in desperate need of redemption. His heart, humbled by suffering, began to turn back to the God he had forsaken. The arrogance that once clouded his judgment was replaced by a deep sense of humility. He realized that true strength came not from his physical abilities, but from his relationship with God. It was a humbling revelation that brought him to his knees in sincere prayer. He prayed for strength, not for his own benefit, but to fulfill his original calling one last time. His prayers were no longer about personal glory or revenge, but about seeking the strength to do what was right. He wanted to make amends for his past actions and to honor the purpose for which he was created. He repented of his sins, acknowledging the pain he had caused himself and others. The tears that flowed were a testament to his genuine remorse. He understood that his actions had far-reaching consequences, and he sought forgiveness not just for himself, but for the hurt he had inflicted on those around him. His brokenness created space for God's grace to flow in, offering a glimmer of hope in the midst of despair. In his darkest moments, he found a flicker of light, a sign that redemption was still possible. It was a reminder that no matter how far one has fallen, there is always a path back to grace. His story reminds us that it is never too late to return to God. No matter the mistakes we have made or the paths we have taken, there is always an opportunity for redemption. Samson's journey from pride to humility, from strength to brokenness, and finally to grace, serves as a powerful testament to the transformative power of faith. No matter how far we have strayed, His arms are always open wide to receive us. The image of a loving father embracing a returning son is a poignant reminder of God's unconditional love. It speaks to the boundless mercy and forgiveness that awaits those who seek it. True strength, he learned, wasn't about physical prowess, but about the courage to humble oneself and seek God's mercy. In the end, Samson's greatest victory was not in his feats of strength, but in his ability to recognize his own weaknesses and to turn back to God. It is a lesson that resonates with all of us, reminding us that true power lies in humility and faith.